Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's webinar, Reduce Risk in Your SAP Environment with Automated Market Data Governance, hosted by SAP Insider and sponsored by SAP and Brisken, LLC. My name is Steve Paul. I'm your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. This webinar is designed to be interactive between you and our presenters. Later in the program, we'll ask for your feedback. You can participate in our Q&A session by asking questions about the information presented in this webinar at any time. Just type your question into the text box located at the bottom left of our console, and then click the Submit Question button. We'll answer as many questions as time permits after our presentation. Slides will advance automatically throughout the event, and you can download a PDF copy of our presentation by clicking on the Download Slide link in the resource box on the bottom left of our console. And at this time, we recommend you disable your pop-up blockers. If you're experiencing any technical problems, please visit our webinar help guide by clicking on the Help icon on the bottom right of our console. And if slides are not advancing, please press the F5 key on your keyboard to refresh your browser. Now on to our presentation, Reduce Risk in Your SAP Environment with Automated Market Data Governance. Discussing today's topic will be Dirk Neumann, co-founder of Brisken, LLC. We also have Richard Franke of Brisken here to join us as well. But first, we'll hear from Dirk.
Yes, thank you, Steve, for the introduction. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. For myself, it is in the evening. So thank you for joining. Welcome to our webinar. And let me start by simply spend a few words about myself and the company. So my name is Dirk Neumann. I'm one of the co-founders of Brisken. Brisken is a company that is building cloud applications in the SAP Treasury and Finance area. We are an SAP partner in the SAP Partner Edge program. And we participate or work together with SAP on various initiatives in co-innovation for the financial services industry or SAP Treasury. And yes, we are based out of Houston, Texas, and also in Karlsruhe in Germany, which is very close to Walldorf, the SAP headquarters, as well as all of our development is being done out of Sao Paulo in Brazil. Today's topic is and just bring it up again, reduce risk in your SAP environment with automated market data governance. So my plan was today to simply elaborate a little bit about what does that actually mean? What are the challenges in the market data governance? And then really resolve that puzzle slowly into saying, so how can this be done? What would be an ideal solution? What should be done in order to implement this? Each of them a single slide. Explaining and talking about this topic. Before then really going into a presentation, because one of the conclusions of all of our professional experience as Brisken is exactly the experience that we're describing in these slides. Yeah, so basically we do then go through a use case of one of our applications where we have implemented a market data solution similar to what we also recommend to our customers and to our audience to look at. So the first question you may want to ask is, so challenges in managing market data. So what is really coming up for me? Yeah, so I think an important piece to make sure that everyone understands is that market data is extremely critical, yet invisible, but it's critical to the reliability of our financial data. Any wrong data, any inaccurate data, untimely data, anything that goes wrong with the underlying market data in your systems will cause havoc, will cause problems, all the way up to the risk of having to restate your results. Yeah. So, and that is only caused by market data, exchange rates, yield curves, interest rates, whatever it is in the process that you need the data for, that may have the wrong result in the end if the data is not correct. So inevitably, the quality of market data is one of the big challenges. So whilst you can, many of you probably are using providers like OANDA, Bloomberg, Reuters, others, but others also use open sources like web pages, central bank data, bank feeds, all sorts of data coming in. And many customers, we have noticed, do barely check the data unless it really hits the accounts, meaning that market data, exchange rates are coming into the system, and any difficulty with the data is only ever realized when an accountant looks at the numbers and says, well, this doesn't match. Or the consolidation, it didn't match, or there's problems in reporting. So the lack of a function, a central function to manage market data, causes issues with the quality of the market data, at least additional work to ensure the quality of the market data. So that is clearly one of the challenges, is then to really make sure, how can I make a guarantee that the data that I'm getting is actually usable in the form that I'm putting it into a system. And the system, it can be an SAP system, it can be another system, can be an Excel spreadsheet. And the importance, and that really addresses the second point, the importance is that you use the same data everywhere. So the absence of the same data everywhere causes consolidation, reconciliation issues, different results, although everything was calculated and done correctly, but because the underlying exchange rates possibly were not the same, causes the end result of that procedure or process be incorrect. So the absence of a single source of truth, that really causes an issue on the data, on the results, on reporting, but also it may actually increase costs because the various areas in a company end up buying the same data multiple times, sometimes even with the same provider. So that can also be one of the drawbacks of not centralizing a market data function and really implementing or having a market data governance functionality. And then on top of that, I mean, that's probably everybody has encountered the issue. New market data is required, changing requirements from the business, changing market conditions. How do we implement this now? If you have interfaces programmed in the back end, or you have disparate solutions where every area imports and brings in its own data, this is hard to manage, and it's cumbersome to manage. Now, what you then end up doing is smaller projects in order to get a new exchange rate into the system, in order to connect to a new provider. Now you have a small IT project on your hand, which causes delays and frustrations amongst the users. So these are, in a nutshell, the typical situation with trying to bring in market data into an SAP instance in less or more or less complex environment. It could be companies that are only using exchange rates. It could be companies that are running a full SAP treasury solution, or companies that are running treasury in a completely different place, in a different instance, in a different environment, but still need to have the same market data in their system across the entire system landscape. So that in turn, I think, is the basis for why actually thinking about a market data governance implementation and procedure. So the real objectives of implementing market data governance is, of course, minimizing your operational risks. Yeah? So the scenario I described earlier, you want to avoid having to restate your accounts or to have to research for errors in the reconciliation because of market data not being accurate or not being timely in your landscape. Additionally, you have the efficiency of your users when something goes wrong, but also just to load data. If you do this manually, you do it in different environments, it's additional work. So if you have a centralized market data governance procedure in place, all of this becomes much easier, much less cumbersome to your users. Then, of course, the objective is to reduce cost, as much as cost of the infrastructure as well as the costs of vendor, in the case that you're actually buying the same data multiple times. And you want to make sure that you'll be able to support your business better by being able to adapt to changes in the regulatory and in the business environment in a much faster manner. You don't want to have projects and IT work to be done in order to get a new exchange rate into the system. So these are the objectives that should address the issues outlined earlier. And that in turn brings us to so what would you like to, what should you be looking at in terms of a solution? So that really means a state-of-the-art market data governance solution should provide you with a single source of truth for market data. So a single place, a central place where all your processes, all your procedures, all your systems source their market data. That could be in a push or pull fashion, but it needs to be the place and the only place where all market data is stored and distributed from. So that also means that it is the only place where market data is being integrated from. So it's a simplified infrastructure that you want to provide. Necessarily, I would suggest in the cloud. That is what you can see here in that little diagram. Why the cloud? Because the cloud is much more flexible in terms of where to connect, where to bring in data from, and to which systems to connect as well. Nowadays, with a cloud infrastructure, it is with much greater ease that you can actually connect to another target system, another SAP instance or non-SAP instance, or where you can source market data from another provider or from another database, or even an internal database of your company. You can connect simply and easily through a cloud infrastructure. That brings me to the flexibility of a solution for that market data governance. You don't want to be tied down to a single source. Now you want to be able to bring in data from any place you'd like. And I mentioned it earlier, that could be providers, that could be central banks or databases that are out there like data.gov, or it could simply be an internal provider, some data that you want to distribute internally from an internal source or database. Of course, the solution needs data quality controls, so you want to have constant checks on what the data is like, so that could be statistical methods, that could be calculations, formula-based checks that you want to apply, just to make sure that whatever data you have is consistent with what you would expect. Because once a wrong rate is out and in your systems, in your system landscape, it is very likely that somebody in a remote part of the world has already used that rate before you can actually correct it, before you even have noticed it. So you want to make sure that the quality of the data is checked constantly. And of course, you also want to make sure that everything that happens to your market data is actually being recorded. So fully auditable databases, that any change, anything that happens to the data, so a manual change as well as an automatic change, you want to see when and how and where it was done. So if ever for audit purposes or for just trying to find out where things went wrong, you have at least a report that tells you everything about the history of your data. And effectively, if something goes wrong, you want to make sure that you have approval workflows or exception workflows, things that simplify the procedure then to fix data or to fix an issue in the system, and just make sure that your data consequently after fixing the data is updated and is up to date again without any issues. So it's not a blank, not knowing to know what to do next. And the same way that we would say that the provider, you want to have the provider agnostic solution, you should also think about having a target system agnostic solution. So not only wherever the data comes from, but also whatever system consumes the data. You want to make sure that your solution actually is able to feed it into SAP, non-SAP, into treasury management systems, into maybe even your corporate web page, where you want to publish your current planning rates, or we had a customer that actually wanted to publish the share prices of competitors, for example. So this is something you need to think of, that it's not only an SAP system, it's not only an SAP instance that needs data, but there's very often other users and other systems consuming market data in your landscape. And overall, you want to make sure that market data becomes a more user-friendly experience, not a black box interface and some system tables that you want to check, but something where if you need to, you can access the data just to see it, just to use it in some place. But specifically when something goes wrong, you want to be sure that there's an easy way to see what's wrong and to fix it as well. So that is, I think, some of the characteristics of the state-of-the-art solution. Mixing the slides a little bit around here. So summarizing, when we just talked about the state-of-the-art solution. Now, the presentation is about the implementation of data governance and the data governance strategy. So a little bit reiterating what we just said. So if you're going out and you want to implement a solution or a data governance strategy, there's four main points or topics you want to consider and analyze. Now, one is that really you have this central repository. You need a central place to store all the market data. Our suggestion is that this should be something in a cloud. And of course, as an SAP customer and as an SAP consulting and software house as ourselves, we are suggesting the SAP cloud platform for solutions such as a central repository. Your solution needs necessarily to have the data validation anomaly checks. So that's a point you need to think about. What are the anomaly checks that you'd require? What is it the business does today? Do they do only limited validation because of lack of functionality, because it's very, very cumbersome? And really list out all those validation and anomaly check methods that should possibly be available. And then at the same time, the integration, the inbound and the outbound, so the integration with the providers and databases and sources of market data, you need to be completely agnostic and able to bring in data from wherever you wish with very little effort. And also look at the way the data can be consumed. So it needs to be an open platform that other systems can log into using APIs or data calls and just consume the data, or basically your solution pushes the data out specifically into SAP systems which are able to receive data from an outside call. So that really is, in a nutshell, the steps and the considerations you should go through in order to build your solution or to define your solution. And that brings me basically to the immediate question. And of course, we're speaking here a little bit out of experience. Do you want to build this or should you buy this? We're in an SAP world, but we're in a changing SAP world. So in the past, effectively, everything was built in ABAP or in some outer layer around the SAP infrastructure. But that is changing fast. So yes, you can still build your custom code, but I'd say it's gone out of fashion in a certain way. But it is possible. With the advantages that you build exactly what you need, but you only build exactly what you need, and that is the disadvantage at the same time. So looking at the custom build option, I would say it always needs to be an extension to existing functionality. That's one thing you should always keep in mind. There is standard functionalities, while it's limited, but there is standard functionalities to feed data into SAP systems. And of course, if you're looking at not only feeding data into SAP systems, but having a central hub that also makes data available to other environments, then you're probably already probably have to develop a little bit more functionality on that end. Now, development is always has two sides, basically. Yes, you can do as you need in all the detail, but it has a cost attached. Yeah, and the more details you put in there, the more cost you'll have. Now, so after you've performed your gap fit analysis of what's there in the standard functionality, start developing the apps, but you invest time, you need to test, you need to maintain the application, so that also costs, of course. And overall, you always be with a solution that has been designed for exactly those requirements as they were today. And one of the main requirements of such a solution today is actually to be able to adapt quickly, to be agile and to change together with the changing requirements and the changing business environment. And at the same time, you want to be able to connect to other providers, find the best source of the specific data that you're looking for. And that in turn really gives us then a quick glance on the buy option, or really the subscribe option. So here you're really comparing custom development of buying something that has been built off the shelf that provides you with the best of breed out-of-the-box functionalities. And but you need to be sure that whatever you do, if you go out and buy, that it must be configurable. So you don't want to have something that is carved in stone by some software editor, and you have to adjust and adapt exactly to the ways of managing market data that the software house thought right. So you need to be able to configure your application. So whilst it is standard, it needs to be configurable, like an SAP system. It is standard, but you can do a little bit within the limits what you'd like. It needs to be agnostic to target systems and data sources, of course, and it needs to come with those governance functionalities. And I think another important point here is really the scalability. You want to make sure that it is scalable, not only, and that's why I called it scalable in all dimensions, but not only in terms of volume of data and maybe numbers of users. And it really is, you want to scale it in terms of more interest rates, more exchange rates, more financial instruments, other types of data, not only market or financial market data. Think about price indices, think about credit data, credit risk data, think about consumer price indices, weather data. There's a lot of things and a lot of data that you may be able to use in internal projects and internal analyses and internal reports that you want to source in a safe manner. And finally, of course, by buying something or getting something off the shelf, you avoid the capital expense, the initial cost. You want to make sure the installation is quick, and you don't have development work. So the option to really to buy something or subscribe to a solution here would of course be useful. Excuse me. So that, in a way, wraps up the overview of the market data governance strategy. So I just want to reiterate and summarize a little bit by pointing out the benefits of adopting such a market data governance strategy, regardless of how you decide to actually implement it. But by implementing a strategy that is complete, as we described and discussed it before, you'll end up having better quality of your market data because you're doing the quality checks and nothing goes into your system without having been checked. You lower your operational risks because only clean and validated data goes into your processes. You increase the user efficiency because you reduce the need to actually validate manually and review manually and fix issues manually with the data. And very important, you increase your agility. You can innovate quicker. You can adjust to changes in the business and technology environment quicker. And that in turn lowers also your infrastructure costs because now, as suggested, you're running on a cloud, and so that's scalable without additional or larger infrastructure costs adding to it. And depending on your situation, you may actually encounter possibilities to reduce your data or market data fees themselves if you were in a situation where you're buying multiple times similar or the same data for different users. All right, so that is the quick overview of the market data governance and why it is so useful to implement and to have this. I'd like now to continue by moving on to a quick presentation of actually what our solution does. I'm going to be really quick because I really wanted to do a demo as well that gives you a feel of what it looks like once such a strategy has been implemented. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we have been implementing market data solutions for a long time. And the result of the experience is the Market Data Hub that we developed on the SAP Cloud Platform, which I'm going to discuss very quickly here as one of the solutions in the market. So the Market Data Hub is an end-to-end solution for the governance of market data, and it's built on the SAP Cloud Platform, and it provides this central repository that I mentioned earlier for the management of market data, and it ensures the quality of the data in all of the systems and in the whole system landscape. The Market Data Hub comes with connectivity, like a library of connectivity to here are some of the main players like OANDA, central banks, Thomson Reuters, Bloomberg, but also other databases like data.gov or Quandl, or any source really can be connected through simple configuration, and that makes it an open platform for data to come in. So and then again, as I said earlier, it doesn't not need to be only market data. Think about any data, like even from news. I mean, we at some point we created a heat map based on Twitter feeds for a marketing event that was happening. And just as a use case to see some way by feeding this data and analyzing the data at the same time, you can create in a very easy way, you can create analytical solutions because now you don't have to go out, search the data and find an integration solution. In fact, we could configure this integration solution using the Market Data Hub. So it is a single source of truth, but it's configurable. It means it has flexible data categories. So whatever you store in there, you define it yourself. So a customer that wants to store just a single rate for an exchange rate, that's fine. But a customer can also store the mid-bid ask, open, close, etc. rates, monthly averages for it, and define the data, the model of the data that needs to be stored and maintained, simply by setting up these data categories. And then map these categories to the actual data that is coming in using mapping rules that are also configurable. Transformation can be done, converting rates from direct to indirect, changing the exchange rate factors, manipulating the date itself. So the date on the last business day can become the first day of the next month, for example, which would be a typical scenario in the US. And so forth. So that's basically what you need to make sure that it has. And then at the same time, at the core of the Market Data Hub, we have 360T data auditing, which records everything that's happening in the hub to the data. The anomalies detection, which is a standard deviation on the time series, finding out whether there's an outlier, that today's rate is somehow outside a certain multiple of the standard deviation. But it's the cross-source validation, that is very interesting. You can use that for very specific cases, of course, but this is to compare, for example, a central bank rate against the provider rate in order to make sure that they're consistent and they lie within a certain difference constantly, and if the difference between the two sources becomes larger than expected, then it generates a notification, and you can see the notification. We're going to see that in the demo later on. And very important as well, the workflows that are being generated by anything that's happening in this in this platform. In terms of target systems, the Market Data Hub today connects to virtually every target system that you like. Again, it's an open platform. It's just a matter of configuring the existing connector that you want to use. So, for example, SAP S/4HANA, SAP ECC. We're working very closely with the SAP Financial Services Data Platform, so the SAP Financial Services Industry Group. We work together, and we have presented recently some use cases as well. But you can integrate with Business by Design, SuccessFactors, and many more. Even Oracle, for example, is one of the target systems that we're integrating with. The way we do that is by using usually an RFC call or OData call into the SAP platform. But systems that can't be called from the outside, they can then consume an OData API on the Market Data Hub to consume the data itself. Very important, maybe also the point to the SAP Analytics Cloud. Very interesting here is that all data in the Market Data Hub can be directly consumed by SAP Analytics Cloud and can be integrated therefore as well into scenarios of the digital boardroom. That's basically another analytical tool from SAP that runs on the SAP Analytics Cloud and which allows you to create beautiful scenarios for analytical and planning purposes. So I mentioned this before. The SAP Cloud Platform is basically the backbone of the Market Data Hub. All user interfaces are built in Fiori, the latest version of Fiori, and so it's that's more or less what it looks like. And at this point, I'd like to go and switch over to a small demo of the solution itself. Just a second here. I need to do a screen share.
Okay, and while we're waiting for the demo to appear, just let the audience know that we'll be taking your audience questions at the conclusion of the presentation and the demo. So hang on for that. We already have a couple of good questions. And I don't see the demo as yet.
Coming up.
There we go.
All right, wonderful. So what I'm doing here, I'm logging on to the Market Data Hub. I'm logging on through the Fiori Launchpad to the Market Data Hub. It's coming up. Straight into. So this is basically the Launchpad. Some of you probably have seen Fiori Launchpads before. For those who haven't, this is basically the new user interface, not so new anymore, but it's the Fiori user interface or user experience, where all of the SAP applications will be running through in the future. And most of them you can nowadays, if you're running on an S4 platform, then pretty much all transactions, at least business side transactions, you can actually execute through a Fiori app nowadays. Here, what you can see is basically every tile represents a function, an application. So this could be a little bit comparable to what you know as T-codes in the past. But here's behind these, there are certain functionalities. You can see them grouped by the different user profiles, or let's say at the very bottom you can see the system settings. So this is stuff you're going to use only once at the very beginning during installation. I'm going to go into details a little bit further later on, what you can set up here. Then the middle piece, that is kind of how you actually want to see the data flow, the integration settings, but not on in a technical view, but more from a business view. So this is what data do I need, which provider do I use, where does the data go, how do I map it into SAP, but from a business perspective, not from a technical interface perspective. And the top piece, that is really how you look at the data. That's where you see the data, where you see mainly when something goes wrong. And maybe that's one of the main things I need to point out here. It is, if everything is fine, then except for cases where we actually want to see some exchange rates or some market data, a user will never have to go to the Market Data Hub. Yeah, because everything runs fine, there is nothing happening. So basically, like in our system right now, there are no notifications here. I don't have anything happening with an error, or all errors are resolved. And what I'm showing you here right now is the integration log. So everything that happened in the back end whilst we are running, whilst we're discussing, let's say, generated an integration log. That means, and I can show that in a few minutes. From the integration log, everything is green. The notifications would show up if there was something wrong. The data audit records all the data that is coming in. And so if you want to see the data that has actually gotten into the hub, then you can go here and actually look at data and modify it or work with it. You can search for specific information, for specific rates and so forth. So that is in the normal course of business, you should see very little things, and whenever you go here, it is when the errors happen. And that is exactly where the value comes in. So market data, as long as everything is fine, it runs smoothly, and that is what the Market Data Hub can provide, the smooth integration of the market data with little effort. But if something goes wrong, then immediately notifications can show up here. Now, there's not much to show in terms of like entering something, of course. It's market data. These are processes that flow in the back end. Therefore, I want to show you a little bit the things, how you set it up, to show you what the flexibility is in relation to what we discussed earlier. So what should a market data governance solution look like? So it needs to be configurable. Now, all of these buttons down here, they're all configuration buttons. Now, for example, the data models. This is in classic technology, this would be tables. This would be database tables. So you go and you define your own way how you want to define. And this is only done once during the implementation or during the installation of an application. So here you define exactly what a table for exchange rates should look like, and you can add things and you can easily adjust them. And that way, you basically configure the exact way that you want to see the data. At the same time, the adapters, service models, and these things are more technical things that are being generated automatically in the back end, but you can look at them, you can modify them if you really want to. Another piece here is you can look at all the different data providers that are already set up, the sources of data, which we call systems, but also the target systems, for example, where we are sending data to. And so, for example, the connectivity settings and the credentials, they're hidden, so you can't see the credentials here. The customer puts the credentials in, but they're hidden in the safe vault. So that is an important aspect as well. And finally, you can once all the technical settings or the system settings are done, which should take, depending on the project, this is a task that takes a few hours, maybe a very few days, you can then start actually mapping the business content into your solution. And mapping the business content, that is really done using the data, what we call the flows or the data flows. Let me click on this. So the flows open. So all of these are different data flows that are happening, and they can be set to active or inactive. And let me go on a simple example first. So this is, for example, this is sourcing OANDA exchange rates from the OANDA exchange rates API. First, you define what it is. You call a certain function, and then you go basically on the designer. You define the exact process, how you'd like to integrate the information. So all of this has been configured. So if you follow this flow here, I hope you can see this. So basically it starts with a schedule. On a schedule you define, in this case, for example, we said, start every day at 3 p.m. Eastern time. But you could also run it every single minute, or you just run it once a month. It is really according to your requirements. You could also run these on specific dates, what we call the multi-date schedule. So rather than having it regularly running every day or every once a month, you can define it's running on the 15th and the 17th in March, and then on the 16th and the 5th in April, for example. So you can freely choose your dates rather than having a schedule. From here, the data is being retrieved from OANDA, and what happens here is basically a very simple setup. So all of this is just configuration. I say I want to get the data from OANDA, so I'm choosing OANDA as a provider. OANDA provides various types of data, so I choose the service that I want to have, the type of integration that I'm looking for. And then simply I say, these are the instruments that I need, and you can add one, for example, very simple. You can just add one here and say, okay, I'd like to get, say, the NOK, US dollar, NOK as well, and you source it that way. And then basically I now added an instrument easily. And here you define the type of information, the type of data that you want to get back. In the OANDA FX API, there's a certain number of fields available that you can choose from. It's just a matter of clicking and choosing, and you basically start integrating that data. The same, of course, exists for other providers or other APIs. Some of them have lists with like 13,000 different fields, and others have just 2 fields. But the concept is exactly the same. You choose the source of the data, the service of the provider for the data, and then you say, okay, this is the universe of information of market data that I want to retrieve, and that is actually the data that I need. And then you're done, and you just continue now. You map it into the market data hub. You store the data in the market data hub, and now we're basically already mapping it to go out into SAP, and we are sending it to 2 different systems with the same definition. So we're sending it to QAS, and we're sending the data to the production system. And just to be on the safe side, we also send an email with the attached file with the exchange rates to a user that can then basically keep that file, look at the file, just keep it as a backup or store it or look at it, whatever you'd like to do. But the idea here is to show the one process of bringing in the market data. You can here branch out and define who should have this data. You could easily, for example, come from here and say, well, I want to hold from here maybe. I want to map this to another provider. So you simply add another instance where you map the data from, and then you basically can continue saying, oh, now I want to save it in the other system, and maybe after that generate a file, and from there send an email. All of this is something you can simply define by configuring, and that way adjusting this flow to exactly what you're trying to achieve. So I'm not going to save this. I'm going to turn back to before. And so that is basically a simple example of how the data flows. What I included here just before we started this meeting, I also included what's called a manual date change that's possible. So I can also go into a table, change the data. When I do that, it also integrates the data into the hub, but it then asks for an approval before it sends the data out into SAP. So very importantly, that I'm getting here an approval message before I'm posting the data to SAP, and it is then posted, also sent by email. So that is a flow that we can now look at and test and see what's going to happen. The way, and this is now a quick check on the clock. We have still some time left. The way that this process or this flow would usually run, it's on the schedule, so it would start at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So it's not the time yet, but you can also start a process manually. So you can go here, execute a flow, and we pick the daily rates from OANDA. We just run that flow, and it's running, and it was a success. So now I can immediately from here, I can go and check the log. So this is already now the integration log of the process that I just ran. Where it tells me just now at 5:44, that is Central European time, I got the data, I mapped it to SAP, and every single one of them has a technical log, which is not for all the users, but it's a technical log that can be looked at. That tells you exactly what happened. But for the user, usually the piece here in the middle is probably sufficient to analyze the status. So basically here we had we got the data, we mapped it to SAP, we sent the file out, we posted the data to the QAS and production system, and then we sent that file. And everything was a success, and it ran in a fraction of a second, as we can see. So this is, and then if we wanted to, we can now go to, for example, the data audit. And in the data audit, again, we're looking at the exchange rates. And here we sort the data quickly. So again, 544. We just had data coming in from OANDA, which we can see here. We have a knock rate that was just integrated. So again, there's a more detailed screen you can go to from here, where you see all the details of the data with the exact timing and everything else. So that was a simple example. Now remember, we also had the manual data change in the flow. So a process that was started when I do make a change to a specific entry. So I'm going back to this environment here. This is the what we call the data maintenance view. What I can do from here, I can delete stuff, but it's highly protected, of course. Not everybody can just delete. What I will do, I will just change a rate here. So I just changed this rate from the end was 6, and changed it to 5. And now I'm saving this. All right. And now when we go back here, what you can see immediately, this notification has just updated all of a sudden. So basically, because of the flow, and let me maybe show you the flow again. So we have a flow designed that tells me every time that I make a manual change, I want to have a data approval. And that is basically a notification that I was being sent in my inbox, in the email, but also on screen in the notifications app. And at the same time, there's a second flow, which we haven't looked at, but it's another flow, just as an example, much more complex. It does many more things and many more validations in the way it has been built. And to be honest, it is mainly built for demo purposes, so I'm not sure that anybody would actually create something like this. But here as well, we have a manual change and a data approval. So this is the reason why now, when we're looking at this, we're having two notifications. And notifications for the approval of market data, of changes to the market data. And one is coming from the daily rates, and one is coming from the monthly average rates. So when I click here, I can either approve or reject. So I'm going to reject this one. I have to select it first. The system told me user error. So I reject it. So I'm going to reject the rate. Now it's marked as rejected, and I'm done. And you see one of the entries here, one of the notifications is gone. Now the next one, again, a rate changed. It's the end of 5, so it's the rate that I changed. Now this one I'm going to approve, actually. And you could have better comments, of course. I just type in approved here. It's approved. It is marked as approved now. I say done. And the notification is gone. There are no more notifications. Now, if you now look at the integration log, and I should have really showed this earlier to show you that the integration log had stopped, but I missed that. So here, basically, before I had done the approval, the integration log had stopped here in the middle, waiting for the data approval. Now, what I did, because I approved it, the flow actually continued and successfully integrated the data now and sent me an email. And so this is really the main part that I wanted to show. Hold on, you're still looking at my screen here. I just quickly wanted to do one thing, show you what I missed in my demo right now. I'm just going to do this again, so I'm going to go back, take that same rate that I just changed, and change it back to 6, so my data is clean again, because I should not have approved this change. So I'm saving it again. So this should have caused another 2 notifications, and what I want to show you now is basically that we have these 2 flows in waiting status, because I have not done the approval nor the rejection. So that's why these 2 flows are now waiting for somebody to take an action. So this is a very easy way to notice. Hold on, we did a change to the data. It's not complete yet. So we can check out exactly what it is by going to the technical log as well. But for now, we know there's a data approval waiting. That means the user knows that he needs to either alert someone that the approval is waiting, or maybe it's the user himself that can actually do this approval. And yeah, I'm not going to do that again because we've done that before. Yeah, and that really concludes my demo. I'm stopping the share of my presentation. And yes, so I think this is a good point to actually go back to the questions and answers. Before we do, but I'm getting basically the questions and answers ready. Just a final word to the Market Data Hub. It's an SAP certified application. It is available through the SAP App Center as one of the trending apps. The Market Data Hub is also part of the SAP Cloud Platform Extensibility Roadmap, which means there's a roadmap out there for S/4HANA Cloud, where extensions on the SAP Cloud Platform are made known by SAP. So it's the SAP Cloud Platform Extensibility Roadmap where the Market Data Hub features. And of course, it is running on the SAP Cloud Platform. So the final words that I wanted to put up, not now, but after the questions maybe, no, probably now, is because we are so happy about all the attendees to join our webinar today. We wanted to invite you together with our partner OANDA, which is one of our provider partners, for a special offer for the year end. So you have this information as well in the slides that you can download. But if you'd like to subscribe to the OANDA API for FX data before the end of the year, together with the Market Data Hub, or even without the Market Data Hub, then you will be able to get a discount for your annual subscription. For those who don't know OANDA, it's one of the main providers of market data, mainly for FX data. So there's like many currency pairs, like 38,000 currency pairs, central bank data, historical data, and so forth that they provide. But before we close completely, I wanted to take questions, if there are any. And Steve, did you get any questions recorded?
Yes, we did, and excellent presentation and demo. We do have time for a couple of questions in our Q&A, so let's get to these first. I think David has one, wants to know, do you need to subscribe to multiple sources in order to get the cross-validation functionality, i.e. for exchange rates?
Subscribe, yes. I mean, you need different sources, whether those sources are paid or not paid. That is the choice of the business. Yeah. So, but if you compare two premium services with each other, then you would have to pay both of these premium services. But I think this question brings me to something to clarify. In our case, for the Market Data Hub, so the Market Data Hub is a bring your own license solution. So we do not provide any subscription to data. If you need to bring in data, you subscribe yourself to OANDA or some of the other providers, or you bring in your own database, your user for a central bank, or what it is that you need. But we do not ourselves, as Brisken, resell or subscribe to data. So that's maybe important to know. But yes, so for the cross-source validation, you need two sources to compare them.
Okay, very good. Just also want to remind our audience that we have a feedback form survey on your console. If you could please fill that out, we'd greatly appreciate what you thought of today's event and how we can improve on future events. Another question here, are the flows you demonstrated on the OANDA example already created, or do I have to build my processes from scratch?
That's a very good question. So what we do specifically for OANDA, we are preparing a baseline configuration, which really is a way to very quickly use existing flows as we deliver them and just connect or basically choose the currency pairs that you need and define where exactly, what are the names of the SAP system and map them into them. So there's certain pieces, of course, on the system side of the customer that we do not know, so we can't deliver them out of the box. But the flows themselves, we provide them at least as a baseline configuration. Then the customer can always choose just to use them, so they're complete flows, but they can also be changed and modified according to what the customer would like.
Okay, very good. Let's see. Jennifer wants to know, is the app certified?
The app is certified, yes, and we are recertifying it regularly.
Very good. And how does pricing work?
Well, the pricing is volume-based, and you're welcome to check on the SAP App Center for the exact prices. But how it works is it's a cloud solution, so the cost of a cloud platform is basically based on volume. So we have created some packages which describe a certain level of usage of the Market Data Hub. So there's a basic package, a medium, and an advanced, and then you can also basically, if you have more requirements and a higher need for data, then we can also simply create a custom package. If I'm not mistaken, I hope I'm not saying anything wrong right now, but if I'm not mistaken, it starts at $150 a month for a subscription, a normal subscription, and OANDA customers actually get a special discount as well.
Okay, fantastic. Does the license of the SAP Cloud Platform come with the subscription of the Market Data Hub from Brisken?
Oh, yes. Good question again. Yes, it does. So basically, subscribing to the Market Data Hub, you do not need a separate SAP Cloud Platform license. So that is basically included in the Market Data Hub subscription.
Okay, and let's try to squeeze in another question here. How long does the implementation take on average for a typical customer?
Again, for a typical customer of different sizes, there's simpler implementations that can be done in really the technical activities in a few hours. Yeah, but because we also suggest phases for testing and then parallel run, so we'd say nothing less than 3 to 4 weeks. Yeah, but that really is 80% doing testing and being on it. Now, more complex implementations can take any time longer as well. I mean, it really depends on the market data universe. If there's a lot of difficult tickers or codes that need to be retrieved and they haven't really been defined yet, then this becomes a longer project. What we have usually seen is that what takes time in the implementation is the definition of the data to be retrieved from the provider. Yeah, so that is, of course, in the case of OANDA, that is very, very simple, so we don't see that type of problem. But for other things, they're very complex because there's so much data out there. It's a lot of timing-related issues as well. And the fine-tuning of the definition of the universe is probably the most time-consuming piece of the installation of the Market Data Hub. But once that is sorted, you have seen in the demo, it is just a matter of copying the 500 instruments into the list in the data flow, define when the data should come, and define the mapping into SAP, and you're up and running. So if you know the data that you need, it takes a few minutes to set it up.
Okay, very good. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this session, so if we didn't get to your question during our live broadcast, someone will follow up with you over the next few business days. And again, for more information, you can see that on the slide here before you. Thank you all for attending today's webinar, Reduce Risk in Your SAP Environment with Automated Market Data Governance, hosted by SAP Insider and sponsored by SAP and Brisken, LLC. Shortly after this live event, we'll send you an email reminder to access this presentation on demand. And on behalf of our guests, Dirk Neumann, co-founder of Brisken, LLC, along with Ricardo Franca, we want to thank you for your time and have a great day.